Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The former assistant trainer to Deontay Wilder, Mark Breland, has opened up in an interview, and it really was sort of like peeling back an onion. From the start, he didn't give too much away, but over the course of the interview, he took a number of shots at his former fighter, from his training methods, his resume, and just not listening. And he also went on to say pretty early on in the interview, Deontay Wilder is done, that he won't beat Tyson Fury. And he also had some time in the interview as well, which was an hour long, and I'll get to some of the details in a moment, to take a few shots at Anthony Joshua, saying that he believes he would beat Joshua right now, and Joshua doesn't have a jab. So through the course of this interview, which was on a YouTube channel Stamina for Sale, a segment called Live with the Fighters Right, hosted by Spencer Fearon and Tunde Ajayi, it's fair to say that Breland has upset a decent chunk of the boxing fandom, those who support Joshua, those who support Wilder, and I've already seen online there is some people going berserk about that. But I'm going to give you some of the highlights of what was said, some thoughts along the way, without some of the shroud waving that you'll get elsewhere, because you're going to get this with this sort of content. So if you do want to watch that interview in its entirety, it is on that YouTube channel, but we will skip through the main highlights. So he did open up pretty strong, even though it's sort of there was a caginess, he didn't want to say too much. He did say that Deontay Wilder is done now. He said he's got a lot of power, he wishes him well, and that's it. We'll see how far that takes him. And when he was asked about Wilder Fury 3, he said, honestly, he doesn't care. He said if it happens, he has no problem with that. And of course, some of this started to get towards the topic of, well, Deontay Wilder has indicated and implicated you as potentially having spiked his water. And Breland sort of defended himself, and this is one of the first times where he has done so. Remembering he was sacked by Wilder several months after the fight. He was the one that threw in the towel when Deontay Wilder was getting battered. It was called off in the 7th round where the towel came in, although the referee said he was close to stopping the fight. But Wilder had sort of said snakes in the camp and all this sort of stuff, and that he blamed Breland for the loss, and that he'd told them never throw in the towel because I'm always in a fight, etc. But Breland had on the water thing, which Wilder came out with about 9 months after the fight, he said my character speaks for itself. And then he went on to say, if you see the tape, you don't never see the water in my hands. And he went on to sort of say, he was with Deontay Wilder. When you win, I win. And he did sort of rationalize it as some people can't take a loss. And certainly with the myriad of excuses and all sorts of accusations, claims, which some of them are absolutely wild, it's clear that Deontay Wilder can't take a loss. He struggled with that fact. And the whole sort of blaming Mark Breland, spiking his water and indicating that could have happened and that it's likely he probably did do that. I mean, come on, that is fanciful stuff. And I know that some people have drunk the Kool-Aid, or maybe the spiked water as it were, and believe that Breland played some part and that beyond throwing in the towel. But when he was asked about the third fight, if it does happen, he says he's not going to beat Tyson Fury. And obviously things did come to talk about the gloves. So they did broach that subject. And Breland said, look, the gloves weren't tampered with. He doubts that could have occurred with all the people that are in the room, including Deontay Wilder's head trainer, JD's. He says JD's was there for the hand wrapping and he didn't say anything. So that kind of sort of put a bookend on that topic. And some people have been saying, and even I'm sure there'll be some comments here, how do you explain the gloves? Well, I would like a rational answer from someone who believes they were tampered with. What was the actual tampering? Because all the different conspiracy theories don't line up. Either padding out or hand down, all sorts of stuff. Egg weight, as Deontay Wilder has claimed, was in the glove. No one was claiming that before Deontay Wilder. Stick to a story and run with it instead of sticking to 73 stories and bouncing back and forth. I mean, myself, I think the whole thing is farcical just with everything. Blaming Anthony Jarrell, blaming the ref, blaming Mark Breland. There was something that Mark Breland said about can't take a loss. He says Wilder has to look at himself. He lost the fight. And he was asked, training Wilder, you were with him for so long, did he listen to you? And Breland went on to say, well, did that look anything like my fights? And then saying, he does what he wants to do. He didn't listen at all. And he said, I thought he could have done better. And he went on to take a shot at Deontay Wilder's opposition, which obviously for quite some period of time, a lot of people were very critical of Deontay Wilder's resume. Some people still are. His championship resume was certainly thin for a number of years. A lot of sort of what I like to call middling meat type opponents, no real tough tests as it were. And Breland sort of backed that up and said, yeah, matched too carefully. And he stated to Tunde Ajayi, when Ajayi said he had some good wins, he says, do you mean good wins or good win? Talking of Luis Ortiz, adding that if I boxed the guys that he boxed, I'd beat them. And Spencer Fearon did go on to try to defend Deontay Wilder and the win over Bermane Stiverne in 2015, which at that point, that was the first time we'd seen Deontay Wilder box more, in a fight, and he sort of boxed to the win, a 12-round decision. The first time, he hadn't got a knockout, etc. But Breland went on to trash that win, saying, you could beat Stiverne. He because bearing in mind, this wasn't all said at once. This was little, sound bites right throughout the interview, the hour-long interview. But the totality of it, you can see that this is building up. That even though Deontay Wilder, and Breland worked together for so long, Breland clearly had some reservations about the training, the methods, and what was going on, the matchmaking, and he thought that things could have been done differently. But Breland wasn't the manager, he wasn't the head trainer, so clearly he had his role and he had to try to execute it. But on the training front, he said that Wilder doesn't have a jab. He used the jab one time, and his motto is, you've got to be perfect for 12 rounds, and that Wilder didn't hit the bag, didn't hit the speed bag, didn't jump rope. And as we know, quite famously, Deontay Wilder doesn't do road work. He likes to do sort of stuff in the water, pull, all that sort of stuff, swimming. He doesn't like that sort of road work vibe. So none of this, in terms of some of that training stuff, is necessarily a massive shock, because a lot of this stuff has come out before in various forms. So it's not in particular of itself new and shocking that Deontay Wilder doesn't hit the bag, doesn't hit the speed bag, doesn't jump rope. He does things differently. He likes to do speed and strength and conditioning. And a lot of boxing trainers will have some reservations about that, but others sort of see some of that strength and conditioning stuff on the cutting edge, and that should be part of a build-up for a fight. But Mark Breland clearly wanted something a little different, but he wasn't the head trainer. So what Deontay Wilder is doing is in part down to Deontay Wilder, but also in part down to JD's. But over the course of the interview, clearly very critical of the setup, the matchmaking, the training, and he believes that Deontay Wilder is done now. Had they stayed together, well, none of this would come out. We know this, that he would have just kept it all to himself. But things, obviously imploded upon themselves, and you had the situation where Breland, for quite a long time, didn't really say too much. He was getting trashed by Deontay Wilder in public, and perhaps the claims about spiking the water was the final straw, because this is certainly more than we've heard him say in public. But this was pretty candid. It was sort of like, as I say, peeling the onion back bit by bit, but in totality, really did fire some shots there at Deontay Wilder. And Anthony Joshua didn't sort of avoid Breland's gaze as well. He spoke about, and it was quite interesting, because obviously there were certain people that were fans of Anthony Joshua who were in the sort of live chat for that interview, and they were enjoying Deontay Wilder, the barbs being thrown at them, obviously the rivalry between the fighters, and some people just hate Deontay Wilder. Let's face it, boxing fans really take sides at times. I mean, I think, you can like different fighters, including all the good ones, if you like to see them fight. But there was a clear sort of almost turning on Mark Breland to some extent in the chat of that live interview when he started to go in on Anthony Joshua, saying that he could beat Anthony Joshua, that Anthony Joshua doesn't have a jab. He said he's straightforward and he's easy to hit. He said that Joshua's jab is actually worse than Wilder's, and he was saying all these things from his experience, that he's got the experience to make these comments. And obviously he wasn't out to win friends and that sort of stuff. It wasn't just out to spray shots at Deontay Wilder. He was spraying shots at anyone where the questions were coming. And some of these questions about Fury, Joshua, Wilder, obviously we know the mix of the fighters, what they've been doing in the past year or so, are potential undisputed. And he thinks thinks that Tyson Fury will beat up Anthony Joshua. But make of it what you will. But I'm sure that there's going to be some comeback from respective fans of Joshua and Wilder in particular. And you're already sort of seeing some of that unhappiness online in different videos and comments, social media. So Breland sort of setting the cat amongst the pigeons. What'd you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.